smaller than you think you are, and that's the best news you're going to hear all day. I did this thing for a long time when I assumed that the success of this church or whatever church was at depended on the amount of effort that I put in. And so I worked too many hours. I had no boundaries around when I would take phone calls, when I would take text messages. I stressed about everything. There could be something left in the lobby. I had a conversation about coolers in the lobby before I came to church this morning. Britt and I did. And like, what if somebody walks in and they see we're disorganized and they think, this isn't the church for me? Or what if something goes wrong with the sound and they think, this church, it just doesn't have it together? Or I say something wrong, which I do. Generally not factually, just like, I shouldn't have said that. And I would stress about this. And for me, it was an act of obedience to God. God's called me to pastor this church. We're supposed to reach people. I'm going to mess it up. And so I have to do all this extra work to make sure it happens. And I had a pastor call me out on it. He said, you are too big in your own eyes. It's a fun conversation to have. And he said, Jesus is the one that builds this church, not you. If people leave because everything's not perfect, they're going to get mad and leave about something anyway, so they might as well leave at the beginning instead of wasting a bunch of time. And if you are the one driving the church, then it's not about Jesus, it's about you anyway. And he said this, he said, you can have a really short ministry that's perfectly the way you want it, or you can have a long and effective ministry where everything's not exactly the way you want it. And you get to decide which one that's going to be. And as little as I enjoyed that conversation, it was very helpful for me to realize that I was putting the success of everything that was doing on me. I thought obedience to God was meant making sure everything was perfect in every way. And that's not the case. He is well aware that I can't control outcomes. And so I'm in process of making this shift, of remembering that he's in charge and I'm not, and that I can set healthy boundaries around when I'm going to take phone calls and when I'm going to take text messages and when I'm going to work, and it'll be okay, that I can do my job and do a good job at my job and then stop and trust him with the rest. And if everything's not perfectly the way I want it, then that means that it either doesn't matter that much or somebody else has an opportunity to step up and grow with that. And maybe that's a lesson you need to learn too. Not about church necessarily, but maybe it is about church for you, but about your whole life. That you are not responsible for outcomes, you are responsible for obedience. I wish those two O words rhymed. It would fit better in the way that preachers do things, but obedience and outcomes don't rhyme. You're not responsible for that. You're responsible for your daily obedience. And everything outside of that is out of your control, and that's okay. We're looking at Elijah and burnout and what Elijah went through as he took on all the responsibility for the outcomes of the entire nation of Israel on himself. And as he expanded everything God told him to do, from just go do this to do this and put on a production and have a whole thing. And we look at the consequences of that and what God did to treat him. We talked about rest, first of all, and how rest is not just sleep. It's not the thing that you do when you can't keep working anymore, but rest is something God created for you and intended for you to do. It's more than sleep. It's about time with him, time with your family, time disconnected from work. He created that, set it apart on the seventh day, and said, you should do this. We talked about time with God and about how we run dry without time at the fountain of living waters, as Jeremiah talked about in Jeremiah chapter 2, as God talked about in Jeremiah chapter 2, that we run dry when we try to take things from God and then make everything happen without him rather than just staying with him. and that if you're not just spending time with God, you will run dry, you will burn out. And today we're going to talk about the last thing that God did for Elijah in 1 Kings 19, and that's he gave him a perspective shift. That's what I had, was a perspective shift. And maybe that's what you need, is a shift in your perspective. Now, here's how we're going to do this today, because I have already preached all the way through 1 Kings 19. We did this about 3 weeks ago, but we focused pretty heavily on Elijah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the passage that we're going to be talking about today, and I want to go back through, and instead of focusing on what Elijah did in this, I want to focus on what God did this. So if you're like, I just heard this, yes, you did, but hopefully there's still some more we can squeeze out of this. I'm pretty positive there is. 1 Kings 19, starting in verse 9, we're going to read through 9 through 18, and then we'll go on. So 9. There he came to a cave and lodged in it, and behold, the word of the Lord came to him, and he said to him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" And he said, "I have been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. And I, even I only, am left, and they seek my life to take it away." And he, God, said, "Go out and stand on the mount before the Lord." And behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind tore the mountains and broke in pieces the rocks before the Lord. And the Lord was not in the wind. And after a wind, an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, the sound of a low whisper. And when Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in the cloak and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. And behold, there came a voice to him and said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" And he said, "I've been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with a sword. And I, even I only, am left, and they seek my life to take it away." And the Lord said to him, "Go, return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus, and when you arrive, you shall anoint Hazael to be king over Syria, and Jehu the son of Nimshi you shall anoint to be king over Israel. And Elisha, I've been hearing Elisha all week. Elisha, the son of Shaphat of Abel-Maholah, you shall anoint to be the prophet in your place. And the one who escapes from the sword of Hazael shall Jehu put to death, and the one who escapes from the sword of Jehu shall Elisha put to death. Yet I will leave 7,000 in Israel, all the knees that have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him." What's happened here is Elijah has come off the pinnacle. Elijah, I'm going to get this mixed up all day. Elijah has come off the pinnacle of his ministry, big fireworks and thunder and all the things that happened on Mount Carmel. He defeats the prophets of Baal. He creates this whole scenario where it gets this big thing. 8 days later, he wants to die. And then he walks 40 days. He goes about 400 miles to Mount Sinai because he wants to talk to God. Now, he's been able to talk to God everywhere else he's been. He was able to talk to God in Israel. He was able to talk to God in Sidon, but now he has beef with God, so he goes to God's office. This is the best that I can come up with. He goes to Mount Sinai, which is the mountain where Moses saw the burning bush. It's the mountain where some people believe Abraham had the sacrifice for Isaac that he didn't go through with. It's the mountain where God gave them the 10 Commandments, and there was fire and thunder and smoke and all the things coming off the mountain. He has beef with God, and he's going to talk to God at God's office. So he goes all the way down to this mountain to talk to God. And that's where we pick up right now. So let's just read through and talk about this. Go on to the next slide there, Clayton. So he confronts God. He says, "This is all the stuff that I have to say to you." And God does not respond to any of it. Instead, he says, "Go out and stand on the mount before the Lord, and behold," actually go back, Clayton. You may have already done it. I think I'm right. No, you're right. You were right in the first place. We'll back and forth here. If I could read this or use notes, this would be a lot easier. In verse 11, he says, "Go out and stand on the mount before the Lord, and behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind tore the mountains and broke in pieces the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind, and after the wind an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire the sound of a low whisper." Elijah goes to God to confront him about all these things that he's upset about. And God says, "What are you doing here?" So he throws out this big long speech that he's got prepared. I'm the only one that's doing anything. I'm the only one that's responsible. I'm the only one that cares about this. You're not doing anything. And God says, all right, I want you to go out and stand. And there's an implication here that we can't really confirm, but it refers to it as the cave several times. And a lot of scholars believe that this is the same place that Moses hid whenever God passed by and he got to see the backside of his glory, whatever that means, that this is the same cave that was there. That's a fun little trivia fact for you. I can't confirm that, but a lot of people believe that. And God comes through and he does all the things that Elijah expected. Fire, earthquakes, wind, all the things that he expected. He says, Elijah, this is what you're here for, right? You're here for a show. You like a show, right? You can't just go to Ahab and say, I'm here. It's going to rain like I told you. You've got to create this whole big scenario where there's all the people gathered together and you're positioned on this mountain between two countries and you got all this stuff happening. I honored you in that. I gave you what you wanted, but now you're mad at me because of that. So here's what you want. You want this. You want the fire. You want the earthquake. You want the wind. Here's the fire, earthquake, and wind. But guess what? I'm not in any of those things. And then he comes by in a low whisper. This is a cool phrase that's used here. Go on back. We're going to stay there for just a minute. He goes in a low whisper. This word, this phrase is deliberately hard to understand because low whisper sounds like it's just talking really quiet. But that's not what's happening. The phrase here is a silent whisper. It's a silent voice. And so it's really confusing, and translators don't have a really good idea about how to translate it, so they say low whisper. But it means silent voice. Why is it so hard? Either it's a voice that is silence, or it's a voice that is silent, and we don't know which one it is. What is it? It's deliberately confusing. Why is it deliberately confusing? Because you don't understand the ability that God has to work. You don't know how he works. We can't even figure out what voice he's using when he's talking. But all these things happen, and Elijah knows clearly God's not in those. But when he hears the voice of silence, he wraps himself in a cloak because he recognizes God in that. God is showing him that all the things Elijah thinks are necessary are not necessary. All the big show, all the complicated things, they're not necessary. God has every ability to work in silent ways that Elijah knows nothing about. God can work in the fire. God can work in the earthquake. God can work in the wind if he wants to. In fact, if you go back to the last time that they were on this mountain, that's how he did work. But Elijah wants the show. He wants it to be bigger. He wants all of that. And God says, I don't need any of that. And look where it's gotten you. Look where it's gotten you demanding the show. Look where it's gotten you demanding all these big things when you could just trust that I have the ability to work in this circumstance without you. The first thing that he does is just pops his bubble a little bit. I don't need you to do all these things to make this work. And if you're struggling right now, you're struggling with burnout, you're struggling with how to just do anything, you're struggling with making it through the day, here's the thing that you need to know. You are smaller than you think you are. And you're trying to carry a load that you were never meant to carry. You think God's only going to work if these big things happen. You think obedience to God is controlling outcomes and making sure there's this big ceremony and the things that you think are going to work. That's not true. God has the ability to work without you. You're included because he loves you, not because you're necessary. He doesn't need Elijah to do any of these things. He could accomplish any of these things on his own, but he chooses to use Elijah and he chooses to work through you. You can calm down. You are not required to do all these things to serve God any more than I'm required to control every experience that a guest has when they walk in here. If it's silly for me to try to control what somebody's going to do based on how we set up the chairs or how nice the lobby looks or how the sound works, it is silly for you to try to control everything that's going to happen by deciding that you have to make your kids' lives perfect or they're not going to grow up to love you. They're not going to grow up to serve God. They're not going to do whatever. If you don't control every aspect of your kids' lives, then somehow the outcome is going to be your fault. You don't control that. That you share the gospel with somebody, you're afraid to do it. You're afraid to share the gospel because you're going to mess them up. As if you have the ability to interfere with the work of God somehow. You're going to mess it up. And so you either do it in such a controlled way that it's ineffective and wastes a bunch of time and stresses you out, or you're so scared that you're going to mess it up that you don't do it at all. You're afraid that if you admit mistakes, that people aren't going to take you seriously anymore. People aren't going to trust you anymore if you admit that something went wrong. You got all this weight on your shoulders that you were never, ever meant to carry. And God says, I don't need you to do all these things to make this work out. I am fully capable of speaking in a silent voice and accomplishing the same thing that you're accomplishing with all of this stress. You are smaller than you think you are, and that's okay. You don't need to show. You don't need to control every circumstance. You just need to obey. And then when you're done obeying, rest and trust Him. In verse 13, this is where I tried to go earlier, but we're just now there. Elijah heard it, and he wrapped his face in his cloak and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. And behold, there came a voice to him and said, what are you doing here, Elijah? No change in the question. Exact same words. What are you doing? Elijah's angry. He wants God to respond. He wants God to fight back. He wants God to defend himself so he can attack God. The whole reason he came here is because he has anger issues with God and he has things he wants to take out, and God doesn't get mad. He just says, I didn't tell you to come here. I didn't tell you to do all of that. What are you doing here? I didn't ask for any of this, and you're mad at me because I'm not following your plan. What are you doing here? And I just got to ask you to consider that same question. You're mad at God, you're frustrated with God, you're upset with God because of all the things He's made you do, all the things that haven't worked out the way that you think they ought to work out. How did you get to the point that you're at? And did it have anything to do with Him, or was it all you? And you laying on extra layers of plan, you laying on extra layers of drama, you laying on extra layers of requirement and responsibility that He never asked for. And you're saying, God, why did you put all this on me? I can't even stand up straight with all these things that you put on me. What did you do this to me for? And God says, what are you talking about? I didn't ask for any of this. If you remember the thing that God asked Elijah to do in the first place that led him to this point, what did He ask him to do? He said, go show yourself to Ahab and tell him it's going to rain. And what Elijah did instead was make himself a direct enemy of the queen of Israel by killing all of her prophets when God didn't tell him to. What he did was make himself an enemy of the king of Israel by challenging his authority. What he did was put himself in a position where he would get lots of glory for the outcome. But he wasn't ready to handle the responsibility. And I just got to ask you, what are you doing here? You're angry with God, you're frustrated with God, you're upset with God, you're exhausted, you're broken, and you're mad at God because of all of these things. And I just want you to consider that maybe it's not His fault. It's yours. You're like the toddler that thinks he can carry a backpack of hammers. It's just too big of a load for you to carry. It's a load you were never meant to carry. And I get that you're angry. I get that you're hurt. I get that you're upset. Maybe you should be, but the person you should be upset at is the one in the mirror, not the one who never asked for this in the first place. But it's great to notice God's reaction to this. It's not being angry with Elijah for yelling at him twice. It's not to be upset with him for trying to carry more, but to recognize that Elijah is a sinner who is broken, who's immature, and He shows him grace. God would be within His rights to smash him like a bug for talking to him like this, but He doesn't. You're angry with God, you're upset with God, you're frustrated with God. He is kind and He is merciful. You should probably watch your mouth, but He is graceful toward you. And before you go blaming Him for things, maybe you should consider who's actually at fault for the burden that you're carrying. Did He ask you to do this? Or did you just decide it was your job to handle? In verse 15, Elijah in verse 14 repeats the whole speech again, but in 15 the Lord said to him, "Go, return your way to the wilderness of Damascus. And when you arrive, you shall anoint Hazael to be king over Syria, and Jehu the son of Nimshi you shall anoint to be king over Israel. And Elisha the son of Shaphat of Abel-Maholah you shall anoint to be prophet in your place." Now this seems like a throwaway thing, but I want you to just pay attention to what's actually doing. This is one of the reasons it's great to read through the Bible and pay attention to what's going on, because you might actually understand what's happening here. And you just kind of miss all of this without it. Damascus is the capital of Syria. The Assyrians are the most powerful nation in the world right at this point. The Assyrians are later going to conquer Israel and take all of them out of there, the northern kingdom of Israel. And then Assyria will be conquered by Babylon. Babylon will conquer Judah, the southern kingdom. There's going to be a whole thing. But right now, Assyria is the most powerful nation in the world. And they're the ones that are going to defeat Ahab. The guy that Elijah thinks he's responsible for defeating, Assyria is the one that's going to take care of that. He's going to die in battle with them. But what God says is, I want you to go and anoint the next king of Syria. This guy will be the one that's used to punish Israel. All the things that Elijah's complaining about, God says, I already have a plan for that. In fact, I'm going to use the nation of Syria to do that. And I'm going to punish the current king for overstepping what I told him to do by putting a new king in place. Of this nation that you're afraid of, that you have no control over, I am in control of that. In fact, I want you to go all the way over there so that you can see how much control I actually have. Then I want you to go to Israel. And in Israel, you're going to anoint Jehu to be king over Israel. Here's the thing. Jehu is not the son of Ahab, the current king. He's a military commander. And what's going to happen is that Ahab is going to be killed in a battle with Assyria. His son will become king and have a chance to repent and choose not to. And then Jehu, one of the military commanders, will overthrow him and take over the kingdom. And what he's going to do is he's actually going to go in and he's going to deal with the idolatry problem. He's going to deal with the false prophet problem. In fact, he's going to deal with Jezebel too. Jezebel's going to come out and mock him after Ahab is killed. After her son is killed, he's going to come out and mock him. And Jehu's going to yell up, if you're on the Lord's side, toss her out the window. And that's where we get the term defenestration. She just goes right out the window. She dies in the street. They remember to go get her body later. And because through prophecy, what was told is they wouldn't be able to bury her. Her body is gone. The dogs take care of her body in the street. That's what Jehu does. And he kills all the worshipers of Baal. He brings them in and he says, anybody that wants to worship Baal, that's a true Baal worshiper, come right here. We're all going to worship together. When he does that, he has the army deal with everyone in that building. Not a thing Elijah had to take care of. He says, I'm going to take care of this problem, and I want you to go anoint the person that's going to take care of it for me. And Elijah, who thinks that the whole world depends on him, who thinks that he's holding up the earth and sky by his very presence and by his work, I want you to go find your replacement. Because guess what? You need to start training him because you're going to be gone soon. And all these things that you think depend on you are going to continue going when you're not even here anymore. So go find your replacement. This is painful. It's painful to have that balloon popped and find out that, you know what, you're a lot smaller than you think you are. But it's absolutely necessary. Elijah, he gets a chance to just be in the presence of God and see that God works that way. He gets a change in insight. And there's some indications in the text that he does get this a little bit, but he's still very angry. Insight is not just enough for him. He needs action. So God says, okay, you are going to take part in popping your own balloon. As you travel around and you appoint and anoint the people that I'm going to use to accomplish all the things that you think are your job. Sometimes insight is not enough. Elijah recognizes that God is not in those other things. He recognizes that God is in the voice because he hides in the cave during those other things. But then he wraps himself in his cloak before he goes out, wraps his head in his cloak before he goes out to be in the presence of God. He recognizes that God is in those small things. But sometimes insight is not enough. Sometimes you have to have your balloon popped. And for some of you, I can see the looks on your faces. I can see the looks on your faces, and I'm talking about this. And you can tell either it's that you got an hour less sleep, or you're getting some dawning realizations about some of the things that you've been angry with God about, or you've been frustrated with God about. And you can get all the insight you want, but for some of you, insight is not enough. You're going to have to take some actions to reduce yourself in your own eyes, to restore yourself to your actual size. Maybe God's going to take those actions for you. Maybe He's going to start popping your balloon for you, and you're going to be upset about that. But understand that it's good for you. It's good for you. One of the hallmarks of burnout is hyperstimulation. What that is that you want more and more and more input, because what happens with burnout is you go numb. Your body can't handle all the stress you put on it. Your body can't handle all the emotional weight that you put on it. So your body starts to shut down some of those emotional receptors. You start to lose the ability to feel some things. So to try to feel it again, you amp it up. This is one of the reasons that people that are burnout get so angry and so upset irrationally, is because they feel so numb, and the only way to feel anything is just make it go crazy. Just get out of there. And you notice what Elijah was doing. He's like, I'm going to repeat this speech. I'm going to repeat this speech. I'm going to come after God. I'm going to fix God. I'm going to deal with God. And God says, let's bring it down. And maybe God has been trying to do that with you for a while. And you just keep getting louder, and He keeps getting quieter to try to get you to calm down and listen. And it's at the point that you're yelling so loud that you can't even hear Him speak anymore. Don't be surprised if your insight is not enough for you and He has to bring things down for you a little bit so you can actually hear Him speak. He popped his balloon, and my advice to you is to pop it yourself before He has to do it for you. Have a Sabbath. We talked about this 2 weeks ago. Make yourself a Sabbath, a day of the week when you recognize that the world will not stop if you do, that the world will not end if you rest. Find yourself a Sabbath. Start looking at your responsibilities. Start looking at the things that you've taken on for yourself and determine which ones God actually asked you to do and which one you took on for yourself, and start taking some things off. Because if you don't, He loves you enough to do it for you. Pop your own balloon. Let's go on to the next one there. But as much as the first one's kind of a slap in the face, it's kind of a, here, let's pop your balloon, the next one is a gift. Yet I will leave 7,000 in Israel, all the knees that have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him. What did Elijah say? There's one person left. One person left that cares, and that's me. I'm the only one that cares. I'm the only one left. You don't even seem to care because you're not doing everything. I'm having to come up with everything, and you just show up to follow through on my plan. You don't care. Nobody else cares. I am the only one. God says, by the way, there are 7,001, because Elisha also cares. There are 7,001 people that I have that you know nothing about, that are as faithful as you, that love me as much as you, that are as jealous for me as you are, that are working just like you. There are 7,001 people. But the thing about these 7,000 is Elijah is going to be training Elisha. He's still going to have input in that. He's still going to have control in what happens with Elisha. But these 7,000, Elijah will have nothing to do with. Nothing to do with their spiritual formation. Nothing to do with them being faithful. Nothing to do with leading them. God is still working. There are still other people, no matter what it feels like to you. There's 7,000 others, and these are probably 7,000 men. So let's add on all the wives and children too that have not served Baal, and you think you're alone. We talked about that tunnel effect with burnout. We talked about it twice at least, where you start to see the world through a straw, where you think you're the only one, where all you can see is your work and your pain, and you can't see what anybody else is doing. And what you need to know is that is a lie. You're being lied to. You're not the only one. And we don't have 7,000 here in this church, but we got a bunch of people in this church that are working right alongside you, whether you can see it or not. And they want to be a part of your life. They want to be a part of what's going on with you. They want to be a help to you. And the only reason they're not is because you're not letting them in. And God says, Elijah, you think you're alone, but I have a gift for you. One is a person named Elisha, who's going to be your assistant. He's going to be your apprentice. He's going to follow you around. He's going to work with you. And you, as much as you don't want it, won't be alone anymore. And that's the best thing for you. And if Elisha's not enough, understand there are 7,000 others that are right there waiting too. And let me tell you something. Again, we don't have 7,000. But there are people in this church that want to be in your life. There are people in this church that want to be there for you, that want to be a help for you, that want to care for you, that want to work alongside you, if you will let them. Elijah didn't get a choice. He said, you are going to have help, and you don't have a choice. And things will go better for you if you learn this lesson on your own than if you wait for God to make you do this. Because when God makes you need help, it's not a fun situation. It's never fun for God to make you need help. That's never a happy day. But if you will instead choose to reach out for help, get in a small group and get to know some people. Get in a discipleship group and get to know some people. Allow people to share what's going on with you. If you will do that, then you won't be alone. And when you feel alone, you'll know it's not true. This all starts with an understanding that you are smaller than you think you are, which is the heart of our faith. Our whole faith is that you can't do it. Isn't that exciting? You can't do it. Every other religion, you can do it. You're just not, you worthless loser. Our religion is, no, there's a reason you can't do this. You're not able to do this. And the understanding that we have to come to enter into faith with this is that I can't be enough. But He can be enough, and He will be enough for me if I just let Him. What we believe is that all people are separated from God by their sin, but that Jesus came to be enough for us. He came to live a perfect life so that anyone who believes in Him might be saved. He offered up His death in our place and His resurrection so that we might have life even after death. He offered up all of this. And to enter into our faith, you don't start with baptism, you don't start by going to church, you don't start by reading your Bible, but you start by understanding that you cannot, but He can and He will. But that's not just key for salvation, it's key for the rest of your life too. That it's okay for you to take a day off. It's absolutely okay for you to take a day off because the world will not end. It's absolutely okay for you to just do the work He tells you to do and then to rest. It's absolutely okay for you to just obey and allow Him to take care of the rest. It's absolutely okay for you to do your job and let Him do His. That's not just true for salvation. It's true for the rest of your life. But if it is true for salvation, then it is true for the rest of your life. Reduce yourself in your own eyes, or he will reduce you for you. Finally, this. After you let him do your job, you got to remember that insight is not enough. Just understanding this is true doesn't always fix everything for you. For some of you, maybe it is. Maybe somebody will come along to you and say, you know what? You're trying to do God's job for him and you need to stop. And you're like, yep, that's a good idea. I'll do that. But for most of us, insight is not enough. We have to take action. So what action do you need to take to apply this? What action do you need to take to allow him to take back his job instead of you trying to do it for him? What action do you need to take when insight is not enough? I don't know what the answer is. I can make some suggestions, but I don't know what the answer is. But I believe this. I believe that he loves you, and that if you trusted him, his spirit lives within you, and he will tell you what it is that you need. It may not be audibly. It may be that you have to be quiet and listen. You may have to get in the Word. You may have to spend some quiet time with him, but he will let you know what it is you need to do. He loves you. And if he's going to go to all the trouble to save you, he's going to go to all the trouble to tell you this is a problem, then he will give you the answer. You probably just won't like it. That's what happens most of the time. People come to me and they say, hey, I feel like God's leading me to do this, but I'm not totally sure. Should I do this? Should I not do this? I'm like, well, you generally know the answer. You just don't like the answer. God's leading me to do this, but I really don't want to. And that's probably where you're going to be. Remember that insight is not enough. You have to take action. We're done talking about burnout, at least treating it. After today, we're going to move on to what happens when he recovered from the burnout. We're going to go through the rest of the story. But for today, the last time that I'm going to say this to you, I just want to ask, what actions do you need to take to restore yourself to your proper size? Because let me tell you, when you start carrying burdens that are actually meant for you, rather than carrying burdens that are meant for God, your entire life changes. You can actually believe what Jesus says when he says, come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. You can believe that when you start carrying the burden he has for you rather than the burden that you've placed on yourself. So what will you do? Will you just look at me and nod? Yep, you're right. We should do that. Or will you take the insight and apply it? And let's become a church that's not perfect, that doesn't do everything right, that doesn't have everything set up just the way I want it set up, but a group of people who obey and trust and rest and allow that to be enough. What will you do? Stand with me, please. Our Heavenly Father, we come before you right now, and I'm so grateful for the chance to gather together and worship and to hear this and to hear that our religion, Lord, is not a faith that says we have to do everything, but rather our religion is a faith that says we know we can't do everything, and so we rely on you for the rest. I ask that you would help us, Lord, to have insight, but to also take action. So this wouldn't just be a realization that we have one Sunday, but it would be a change for the rest of our lives. And for those of us that don't know what that change should be, I trust you enough to tell us. And I ask that they would seek the answers. Seek through your word, seek through time in prayer, seek through asking for counsel. They would seek out the answers and lead to real change. I thank you, Lord. And it's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.